Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. Thank you for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Shae Mayan. She is an active duty sailor and an online fat loss coach. Shae was a full-time personal trainer before joining the military and felt called to join at the age of 25. Along with serving full-time, she is a huge advocate for enhancing lives through nutrition, movement, and mindset coaching through her online training business, Mayan Fit. She lives in San Diego with her husband and dog Gypsy, loves to eat, and is currently taking up surfing. Her philosophy is to fall in love with the simple things in life and to never be afraid to change your life if you are not where you want to be. Anything is possible. Shae, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely, Rachel. I love what you're doing here, and I think there definitely needs to be more of it. So thank you for doing this.
Of course, but I'll let you go ahead and share your story, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So as y'all heard, my name is Shae. I've been active duty for 3 years now, and I have been deployed 3 times, twice to Japan, once to Bahrain. And honestly, you would think Japan would be like the best deployment, but honestly, Bahrain was probably one of my favorites, and that's actually where I met Rachel. The camaraderie is incredible, and that is one thing about the military that you do get is you meet some people that are lifers, and people that you can just immediately hit it off with, and you feel like you've known them for years. And that's how I definitely felt when I met Rachel. So I'm very thankful and blessed for that. But yeah, I guess as far as military and mental health, I kind of want to go into the story of my experience and how it's been within the military. So I don't want to make this surrounded by COVID because I feel like there's just a lot of COVID fatigue. It's just constantly talked about. There's constantly a new variation coming out. However, I do think there is a side to the military that a lot of people are unaware of and they do not see. And I want to add the disclaimer that I feel blessed to have the experiences that I have had. And, my faith is huge. So I believe everything happens for a reason, and God is guiding, everything, every aspect of my life. But there are parts that I'm not super happy with. And there's definitely some valleys and some lows with mental health in the military. So I guess I'll take it back to, let's see, where do I start? Well, COVID started end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and that was when I was deployed to Bahrain. And so I kind of missed a lot of it. Like, we were taken out of the picture. We were kind of in our own little desert island, isolated out there, which it was nice because we had our crew and we worked and we just hung out, and we kind of just got to be in our own little atmosphere away from all the chaos. However, when we came home, that was when quarantine started, and people started getting really sick, and it was a scary thing that nobody knew what was going on. There was so much disaster, and it struck everybody. I mean, it did not discriminate, and to this day it saddens me with what's going on. But going through that, being quarantined, it just seems like we're here in 2022 now, and nothing's changed. Like, besides the fact that the vaccines have come out, and that's a whole other story, which we'll get into. But yeah, everything, it still feels like the world just cannot get a grip. And so with deployments, you have to be quarantined. So now this quarantine was in place, and I was actually quarantined in a 1 year time span, for 4 months, I was in isolation. So for 4 months, I I couldn't see anybody, and it wasn't all at once. This was all broken up over the year, but it started to get to me. I couldn't see anybody, I couldn't be around anybody. And it was like the max was 1 month period in like one sitting. I couldn't go outside and work out and, just have those basic human needs of touch and connection and, movement, which I'm huge about movement. I have my online training business. So it's something I'm super passionate about. But yeah, so being isolated and not being around anybody kind of got to me. So being in the military, you are held to a certain standard, and you are, you're all soldiers, you're all sailors, you all supposedly have this one standard that you're held to. So you're supposed to follow these rules that are specific. And literally, if you get sunburnt, it's considered damaging government property and you can get in trouble for it. Like, military is a little bit twisted in that way. So let's see, it was after I think my second deployment, I came home, and at this point, I was a quarantine queen, is what my grandma would call it. And I hit such a low point with my mental health. I was just going stir crazy. And the only way that I knew would help my mental state was to go to the gym. And I'm not like saying this was the right thing to do. Definitely looking back, it's one of my regrets, but they quarantined us, they tested us, they quarantined us, even if we were asymptomatic. So I had no symptoms. I was already in quarantine for like a week at this point. And, this was like the seventh time that I had been in isolation. So I was like, you know what? I need to do something for my mental health. And so I ended up going to the gym like at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday when nobody was there. However, there was one person that was there, and she ended up being, she was like my lead petty officer, so like my LPO, so kind of the person in charge of me. She knew I was supposed to be in quarantine, and this person, not naming any names, but is she is absolutely not meant to be a leader. And I say that, with, I don't take that lightly when I say that. This is somebody who's out for herself, wants to put anchors on, is doing everything that she can to look good in front of, our chief that I had at the time. Somebody that knows how to play the game. And that's another thing about the Navy that people don't see is the games that have to be played in order to advance. And there's favoritism, and, there is sexism, and there's things that I wish could be different. But that, that's kind of everywhere in the world, but I feel like it's a little more amplified within the military just because it is such a small percentage of people and it's a small world. So anyway, back to my story. I saw this one person, and she immediately like just started freaking out on me. Why are you here? You're supposed to be in quarantine. You're infecting everybody, just going off on me. And so I was shaken up. I'm like, great, my career's over. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I was just like, I was having such a mental health low. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to come work out, move my body, get my head out of, get out of my head. And then I end up running into this one person that I've never seen there before. And like I said, it wasn't necessarily the best decision on my part, but I also wasn't in really the right mind frame to be making the best decisions. You put somebody in quarantine for 4 months, out of a year, and they're going to break at some point. And I understand the military is trying to protect their people, and we have to be a ready force. But I also think that people live in fear, and I think if you have somebody who's who is perfectly healthy and fine and whatnot, then they tested negative, like you shouldn't keep them shackled to their bedroom. So I ended up going home, and basically what ended up happening was I went to a DRB, which is called a disciplinary review board. And this is also something that I was unaware of before joining. Not sure if this happens in any other branch, but it is where the Chiefs mess likes to put their big boy pants on, per se, and make a complete fool and humiliate you and belittle you and just rip you to shreds. They tear your character apart, and it is a personal attack. And I hope that I'm not like going to get in trouble for saying this, but or exposing this, but I think it's something that absolutely needs to be exposed. And I don't think that the DRB was really created like to for that reason. I think it was created to help guide people with their mistakes, and just like to see if they have remorse and to kind of course correct. But that's not what mine turned into. I show up to this DRB and I'm shaking, like I'm in my blues. First of all, when I walk in, there's 20 eyes on me, and I was so shooken up. I knew what I did. I didn't know what was about to happen. And mind you, at this point of time in my career, I was trying to get co-located to my husband. So I had a lot on the line, and if anything would have, taken place, like if my rank would have gotten reduced or if they would have moved me somewhere else, it could have extended that or completely canceled it. So my whole marriage was honestly riding on this point, and so I was an absolute mess. So take the isolation on top of, the being ridiculed and picked apart for who I am as a person, put those two together and you've got a mental health mess. So I go to this DRB. Long story short, the command master chief, which is like, he is super high ranking and he is supposed to be an advocate for the enlisted. And that's not the case. That's not what I found to be the case. But as much as I'd love to name names, I'm not going to. But I stood there, and the first thing they said to me was, excuse my French, but quote unquote, you look like absolute shit. And I just stood there. I'm like, okay, here we go. I'm like, God, give me strength. I need you right now. They go on to scream in my face to say I made the worst decision of my life, that I infected and I probably killed multiple people, giving them COVID, even though I didn't have it. That I shouldn't be a sailor. I didn't deserve to be Sailor of the Year. They wish that they could take my Naval Achievement Medal away from me. The CMC told me he was going to do everything in his power to reduce my rank. Just things that are probably going to stick with me for a very long time. And I don't think they understand the severity of what it does to somebody to get in their head like that when they're already at their lowest, and then just push their nose in the dirt even further. And I think that's one part of the Navy that as soon as I walked out of that room, I said, I'm getting out. Like that was it for me. I'm like, yeah, I messed up. I made a mistake. I was standing there. I was remorseful. I was crying. And also another thing too, they say don't cry in uniform. The female chiefs are gonna eat you alive. That's such BS. It's absolutely asinine. People are. Do you understand? Like, it's cathartic. It is releasing. It is healthy, and it's necessary to cry and to feel those emotions. Like, that's another issue that we can get into later on. But I walked out of there feeling the lowest I'd ever felt when being in the military. And I said, I'm never being a chief. I never want to do this to somebody. I never want to be a part of this. It's not okay. They should have somebody on suicide watch, a psychologist, after putting someone through this. And that was it. That was a turning point for me. Like, to that point, I was, maybe going to stay in, maybe going to go to OCS and what have you. But it opened my eyes. It opened my eyes from that point on. So from then on, I went to what's called XOI. You basically stand in front of the XO, and he's way kinder, way less way more innocuous, just less threatening. And he basically just said, hey, why did you do what you did? Do you understand? I said, yes, sir, of course. But it went up even further to this thing called captain's mast. And that's where you stand in front of your skipper, your CO, and you basically beg for forgiveness. And I explained to him, he's like, why'd you do this? You were a good sailor, this, that, and the other. And I said, I wasn't thinking straight. I was in isolation. It's no excuse. And I pleaded my case, and I was just, voice was shaky. Like I felt like my whole world was crashing around me. It was the worst 3 weeks I've ever had in the military, even worse than boot camp. And that's saying a lot. So he ended up giving me forgiveness, and he let me off with a warning. And I was just, I was like, thank God, thank you, God, so much for just pulling me through this. I made a mistake, and I definitely paid for it. So that worked out, and I'm so grateful for that, because I went through with my transfer, and now I'm in San Diego with my husband, and life is good, and I feel so blessed. But going on with the story with COVID and how it's kind of impacted everything, you go from that to a little bit later down the road, the vaccine mandate. And I want to make another disclaimer. I'm not anti-vax. I think that they save lives. And I know that there are incredible scientists that devote their life to this work. However, I can say that I do not trust certain leaders in this country right now. I do not think the way that things have gone down, the way the leaders have gone about things, have been the right way. Forcing somebody to choose between injecting themselves with this unknown toxin, this unknown experiment, that they don't know what's going to happen in a year, 10 years time from now, versus somebody losing their livelihood and their job and their ability to put food on the table for their family. Like that when it first started coming out, I'm like, there's no way they can mandate this. There's no way they can like hold me down and stick something inside my body that I absolutely do not agree with, and that be okay. But here we are today, 2022. It's a fallen world, and people don't think for themselves. And I understand like COVID's not to be messed with. I already had it. Like, let's be perfectly clear. I had it. I had a sore throat for 4 days, a little bit of a fever, but I'm actually thankful that I had it, because now it makes me even less fearful of the thing. Like, that's the problem with the media, is they exacerbate and exaggerate what the reality is, and they just put fear into everyone, fear into existing. And I think that's just it's honestly, it's so dumb. It's so sad that that's what this world has to come to in order to drive people to do what the leaders of this world want them to do, if that makes sense. So we're here with this mandate, and so now I get this choice between, do I take this experiment where, not to get into it, but I actually have a pilot friend who took Pfizer, second shot. She got myocarditis, which is like inflammation of the heart. She is now downed, like 100% never going to fly again, probably never going to fly again, because her heart is permanently scarred and damaged from the vaccine. So it's either one, I take the risk, and I'm a yes man, and the military likes yes men. They like people to line up and do whatever is mandated and not question it. Or do I get kicked out and get, back then they're talking dishonorable discharge. So do I get the same type of discharge as somebody who has raped somebody or, caused murder? Like, are you freaking kidding me? You put me in the same category for wanting to take care of my health and not inject my body with something that could harm me. And you put me in the same category as somebody who's committed those crimes. That's not the case these days. I think they're talking now general under honorable, which basically they take your GI Bill. So you don't get your GI Bill, but you get everything else. So here we are today, and it's been months of unknowns. I actually had a religious exemption that was submitted. I think there's over 4,000 submitted. Not one of them have gotten approved. And that's another thing. It's like, why even have this option? Why say that, there's religious freedom and you're allowed to be a Christian, you're allowed to be this, that, and the other, but you're only allowed to be that if it doesn't impede on any mandates or having the force, 100% ready or whatever. So I put this religious exemption in and I got it back. It was denied. So living in all of this, like the past few months, has started to cause anxiety, and I've actually started to get panic attacks, and that was something I had never experienced before in my life. So I think I'm just starting to realize, like, God, people in the military really, like, there are some people that really do need help and they just don't know how to ask for it. And there's also, high functioning depression and high functioning anxiety, or, having anxiety disorder that people don't realize they have, because I think it just gets swept under the rug and we're just expected to sit there and take it and not, I guess, not speak out per se. Right now I'm working on a Panama schedule. So, and the command I'm at now, I really like the leaders. I think they really hear what their sailors have to say and what they want. And I've only had good experiences with these people at this command, and I'm so blessed and thankful for that, because my last command was horrendous. It was just like, it was so bad that I would have rather been on the road working 16-hour days every day than be home with the people at that command. So, aside from my chief, she was pretty awesome. She really cared for her people, but everyone else, most of the other leadership, just, they all need to go to leadership course or something, or like go to freaking counseling themselves. I don't know. But anyway, so now I'm on this shift to where I am switching from days to nights every week and a half, 2 weeks. And it is completely messing with my circadian rhythm, my schedule, it's amping up my anxiety that much more. And that's also not talked about enough, is not only just mental health, but actual physical health. Like, drinking 2 bangs a day wreaks havoc on your adrenals. It is not good. Like, sitting in a chair for 12 hours a day, it's absolutely terrible for your body. We are not meant to sit. Humans are not meant to just sit stationary in a cubicle surrounded by electromagnetic fields, EMFs, computers, all day in the dark with no sunlight. And excuse me, I knew this coming in. I was going in as an intel specialist. I knew that I would be sitting on a computer all day, but I guess I just didn't realize how much it would make me feel like I wasn't human, like not having vitamin D, not having the freedom to move around. And not to mention, they expect you to sit there and, like, not take lunch. And that's just, it goes back to the pandemic that we're in right now. Like, why is movement and nutrition and health not a mandate? Like, why is it not mandated to have every single person allow 8 hours of sleep per night and allow an hour and a half or 2 hours in the day to go work out and meditate and eat? Like, why is that not a thing? I understand there's like functional, there's demands for, what's the word? Like manning. There's manning demands. There's like being ready. I understand that. And especially when you're on deployment, that you really do have to sacrifice part of your health, which is unfortunate, to get the mission done. And that's just a manning issue. Like, but here's the thing. I don't think if more people were to join the military that it would change. Like, you hear every single command that you go to, oh, it's a manning issue. It's a manning issue. It's like, is it really though? Or is it that we're just not taking care of the people that we do have? Because I think that's the case. If we were to better take care of the people that are in and focus on mental health and movement and fitness, nutrition, health, then I think the retention rate would skyrocket. It would be way, way better, way stronger of a force. We'd be able to combat this warfare we have going on right now with COVID. So that's kind of been my journey. I mean, I set my religious exemption up, got denied, and now I have an appeal in. And honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do when that comes back denied, because I do have a feeling that White House is just, they have to say these claims, oh, it's religious freedom. But no, it's not. I know their MO. Like, they already have their plans. And I guess if it's just to get rid of the people that are not yes men, then so be it. Like, I guess that's just my journey and my past. But this is not something that I will bend on. Like, half of my family, it's caused so much division in COVID in general. It's caused so much division. And that's exactly what the leadership of the country, of this world, wants. It's, like I said, a fallen world. And what people don't get is, if we came together, if we, the people, or actually we, the people, and we stood up, and, there's power in numbers, and said, no, this is not okay. Like, no, I'm not going to do this to keep my job, to keep food in my belly, then we would be able to run this country. Like, we would be able to actually make change. But people are being divided, and that's the exact opposite. It is like, I can't remember who said it, but one of the great leaders, I think he's a president, he just said, if America were to fall, it wouldn't be from the outside in. It would be from America turning against itself, from the people turning against each other. And I see that happening right now. And I think people need to wake up. And the fact that they're not, and they're just like, oh yeah, I'll just get like my 5th booster and I'll just stand in line, and what is it going to take to understand and realize what's happening here? Like, they want control. And if you can't see that you're just falling in this pecking order and falling into this line of control, then I don't know what to tell you. Because I there's this thing called discernment, with the Lord, and it's like discerning what is from him and what is from the world and what is from the devil, and just knowing, like, what messages are coming from God. And everyone has their own relationship with him. But for me, my favorite verse is Romans 12:2. It's, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that basically means, like, don't fall into the patterns of everybody else just because that's what they're doing. Don't fall into the addictions of alcohol and sex and drugs and the things that we think are going to set us free, but they're not, because this is a very fallen world. And, God didn't create disease, and God didn't, create harm and just complete disaster of the world. Like, he's, to me, it's just, those are things that happened because there's sin. So, I mean, I kind of diverted there. But this kind of goes back to, like, with what I do on the side with the fitness thing and the mindset training. Like, I love what, Your Story Doesn't End Here podcast is doing. It's getting the word out that there's always two sides to the story. And I think people need to be the biggest advocate for themselves. They need to speak up and not be fearful. That was my other thing. I think boot camp teaches you to be a follower, to be an Indian, right? Not a chief. To be an Indian, to be a follower. And then apparently the military is supposed to mold you into this leader. However, you're always going to have to be some sort of follower. And you're always going to have to follow this type of rule and this culture. And I guess I just don't fit the mold. I don't know. I've struggled with seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. Like I said, I don't think it's okay to make people work 16-hour days and not get any sleep and just live on bangs and live on energy drinks.
There's a couple things that I wanted to dive into.
Yeah.
If you're cool with that. First of all, I know that you and I have kind of a similar peer group on the internet when it comes to, like, the vaccine mandates, and obviously everyone has their own opinion about it. I know people on both sides of the story.
Right.
But what I've been seeing come up a lot in the military, for people that are choosing not to get the vaccine and to file either a medical or religious exemption is I'm seeing a lot of discrimination. And I'm seeing some really heartbreaking stories. And so I was
Yeah.
just curious if you had experienced that or you know anyone that's experienced anything similar to that. I think one example that really comes to light for me, there was an individual who like couldn't see his grandma who was dying or like grandparent that was dying because he didn't get the vaccine. And so stuff like that really breaks my heart. But I was curious if you had come across anyone or experienced anything like that yourself.
That's a really good question. I think, like I said, for me, this command I'm at right now, the leaders are understanding and they know how big my faith is. So they know that my religious exemption, it's honest. And, for people that don't understand the correlation between the religious exemption and the vaccine was actually created with testing with aborted fetal cells, an aborted fetal cell line from the 60s, which many of vaccines were. And, you could say, well, you got 17 of them in boot camp. And I'm not exaggerating. You literally get 17 vaccines like at once in boot camp, which is also disgusting. But I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that was the case. And Christians don't believe in abortion. So that's a whole nother thing. But going back to your question, have I been personally discriminated since this whole thing started? I think people kind of err on the side of caution when they're around me, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think they're very sensitive to the fact that, like, I have these viewpoints, because they're just like, well, why don't you just get it? Like, people they don't do the research for themselves, and they're like, well, you've gotten, so many before. I don't get why you're throwing such a fit with this one. And I try to explain myself, but it almost goes nowhere. I hit my head against the wall because they're not willing to hear it. And the main thing that's going on right now is there's a mandate to get required weekly testing of people that are unvaccinated in the military. So they're basically doing everything that they can to make our lives miserable so that we will conform and we will just give up. I know multiple people who have not been able to take leave, just like you suggested. I almost wasn't allowed to take leave at one point. I actually almost got stuck. So I was in C school, which is a extra training before I got co-located with my husband. And they almost kept me there waiting, sitting there for months on end for my religious exemption to come back before they would allow me to PCS. And that would have been like, so at this point, my husband and I had spent like a year apart, and it would have been more time on top of that. But this is where I see God come through. They let me through. I got on the plane. And as soon as I got on the plane, they called me and said, no, you need to come back. Like, you're not allowed to leave. You shouldn't have left, this, that, and the other. I land in California, and I said, I'm not going back. Like, you guys let me go. I'm already here. There's no way. And so God worked his magic in that. I ended up being able to stay in California. But my other friend, she's in Virginia. She's also going through the same thing. She has her waiver, and her command's actually way worse. They have literally labeled the apple and orange basket, said unvaccinated or vaccinated only. Like, they've split the food, and they segregate the unvaccinated people into this tiny, dark, dirty corner of the galley to eat. And they get screamed at on the daily. She gets tested weekly, and they jam. She said she couldn't smell, or like her nose, she couldn't touch her nose for a week after one of the testings that they had done to her. Like, they're inflicting actual pain on people who are not conforming or who have different beliefs. So I've been so blessed because, like I said, I haven't really experienced much discrimination with it, but it is out there. And just because people don't understand, like, why we see this different viewpoint, which the media is going to tell you, they're gonna cause fear and make you think that you're the minority just because you don't agree with this vaccine. But that's not the case. There's actually more people than you realize that also question it. So my problem with it is the mRNA, and I'm not, definitely don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it hasn't been tested long enough. And so, yeah, I mean, like you asked, Rachel, I haven't experienced much discrimination, but it's definitely out there.
So when you talked about being in quarantine and your mental health and quarantining for so long, one thing that really came to mind for me is whether or not there was mental health support offered. And I remember when we were in Bahrain and the new crew came out to relieve us, and that was like kind of the first time that the military started implementing a quarantine process. And I don't remember, granted, I didn't experience it myself out there, but I don't remember anything being offered. But I was curious if when you were in quarantine at any point, if anyone offered any kind of mental health services or offered for you to talk to the chaplain or anything just to make sure you were okay while being in isolation.
That would have been a really good remedy for what I was going through. And no, I mean, you know, looking back, like I definitely should have reached out to somebody. I mean, I had the support of my husband and my family, but sometimes like you just can't explain what you're going through, and you definitely need a professional. So, I mean, my command, they said, "Hey, call if you need us to drop groceries off." But other than that, there wasn't like, "Hey, how are you? Okay, are you holding up?" Like the whole time I was in quarantine, I didn't hear anything from my leaders. Nothing. The only time I heard something from my leaders was when I got in trouble, and then they were on my ass. They were, "Oh, I think I just saw you driving. You better not be out. You're already in so much trouble." And yeah, it was actually kind of the opposite. So,
That's what I figured, but um, you hope for the best, I guess. So
I
hopefully
know you
something's changed
do.
with that. But I mean, and maybe talking about it, something will change with that because I don't think it necessarily has to be something from top leadership in the Navy. That's something where individuals could just check on each other. And I am like huge on that. People just checking in on each other and being there for each other. And so anyone that's listening to this episode, if you know people that are going through stuff like this, I mean, I encourage you to just check in on your coworkers, your friends, even if they're not in the military. It's tough times for everyone right now. And so I think it's important. Shae, so you talked about your DRB, and
Yes.
it's interesting because I've been through DRB before too. I think a lot of people in the Navy have, but
Yes.
it's interesting that you brought up the fact that they just ridiculed you because I think that happens a lot. And the DRB, if you didn't know, is actually supposed to be a fact finding process. So all they're supposed to be doing is just getting the facts of what happened and then going
Right.
from there. When you went through DRB, and I think I already know the answer to this because I've been through it, but was there any kind of support offered to you when you went through that DRB process as far as mental health goes?
Heck no. I mean, the girl that ratted me out and made sure this process happened was actually the one that drove me down there. And that was another thing. They took the control out of my hands. So not only was I not allowed to drive myself to the DRB, but I wasn't allowed to like be alone and like go call my husband, go call my family after the DRB for like an hour. And I understand this, I don't know, maybe that is a suicide watch or whatever, but you should at least allow somebody to go actually call somebody who cares about them. Like, that wasn't offered. That wasn't, and I had to go back to work after that. Like, why would you put somebody through something like that and then expect them to perform at work? So, no, like I said, Rachel, there should be a psychologist standing by. You know what? No, scratch that. This shouldn't even be a thing. Like, they should, like you said, be a fact finding process. What happened? What were you thinking? Like, not like, what were you thinking, but like, hey, like, well, what was going through your head when you made this decision type of thing? Like, let me understand, let me in your world. I honestly think a psychologist should probably um, execute the DRB, and there be maybe like two chiefs there, not 20 to intimidate you and make you feel like you're getting attacked. So no, there was no mental health support whatsoever.
So I have talked to someone before. This is kind of slightly off topic, but I have talked to someone before that said that they brought a JAG in with them to their DRB, and it was a different process. So I think that the process is set up to be the fact finding. It's just you get that human factor in there and the power dynamic, and it just changes the way that things go. And it's unfortunate, but
Right.
I think there's a lot of that like old school military mentality still. And
Yeah,
I personally think that that's something that needs to change. I don't know how you feel about that old
I
school.
agree. I think it could be a good tool if it was done the right way, just as you described. Like if it was actual adults having a conversation, not a one-way scream in your face type of thing. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so kind of one of the last things I wanted to touch on here is the physical fitness part of things, because I know that you work in the physical fitness industry, you have for a couple of years at your current command. Because I know when we were in the same command, I don't know about your neck of the woods, but where I was at specifically, PT was like never a thing. And is it something that you are currently doing at your command, or have you experienced it in like your C school or anything? Or is it still pretty straightforward across the board that you're not really seeing PT prioritized?
no, I think COVID again has made things very challenging with that. Before COVID like really hit, we were doing command PT. So like, I don't know, twice a week, where we would do shop PT, which I actually enjoy that because it got the people out together out of the work environment. Everybody's in their civilian clothes. So, people just act a little bit different, like a little more relaxed when they're in civilian clothes. And I think that was a huge team building thing. But as currently right now, we have nothing going on. Like it's all self PT. It's all like, hey, you're in charge of your own health. Like make sure that you can pass the PRT. So no, there's nothing there. And I would like to change that as well.
Tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing as far as working with people and really working to change the culture. Maybe not even necessarily in the military, but with people that you work with and helping with the mindset aspect and the physical aspect of fitness.
Right. So I was a personal trainer before I joined, and I've I took a step back from it once I went into the Navy, but I just kind of felt called recently to get back into it because I miss making those connections and seeing people's lives transform before their own eyes and seeing people dedicate themselves to something new and have a higher vibe, live a higher life. And so basically what I do in my mission is to help as many people as possible with mind, body, spirit transformation. Like I think there's always different levels and layers that we can go. And if you're always living for Friday or the weekend, or you always are in the mindset of I'll be happy when I get a raise or when I get married or when I find my soulmate, like you're never going to be happy. And I noticed it a lot, especially with like my coworkers. Just everyone's like, "Ah, it sucks being at work. I can't wait till we're off," or just always living in the future. And so I created this program to not only specifically like have the physical benefits of fat loss and energy gain, but to have that mentality of why don't we just sit down with a journal every day and go over some journal prompts and have some introspection and see, all right, are we where we think we want to be in life? And if we're not, what steps do we need to take in order to get to that point? It's giving actionable like law of attraction, like steps to evolving somebody and changing their perspective to, hey, I don't have to be miserable. Like, hey, I don't have to live for Friday. I can romanticize the small things like waking up 10 minutes earlier in the morning just so I can stare at my baby while she sleeps, or like kiss my husband on the cheek, or what have you. And it's falling in love with these little things that I think a lot of times we overlook just because life is so busy and chaotic. But that's my whole mission for my Mayan Fit, is just to help people with their physical aspect, to teach them how to eat for their bodies, but also their mental aspect and how to grow as a person. Because if you're not growing, like you're not going anywhere. Like you shouldn't go 365 days every year, year after year, and look back and be the same exact person you were. Like if you do something 1% better every day, you're 365% better a year from that day, or, a year from then. So, it's a lot of like, I guess, perspective shift, but also like a lot of self growth and love in that, and really discovering what are the things that make me happy and how can I do more of that, and how can I be happy with where I am while also working towards, my future goals and dreams and aspirations. Because honestly, anything is possible. And I know people say that and it's trite, but it's true. Like you have a goal, you have a vision and a dream, and you put law of attraction, or, you believe in God, and you work at that and you do actionable steps towards that. Like think about lifting a weight, or, you want to lose weight. Like if you do it for 2 days and then you look in the mirror, like nothing's going to change, right? But you do it for 30 days, for 90 days, for a year, and then you look back, there's massive change there. And so it's the same thing with our mentality and our mindset. Same thing. So we do small little actions day by day to then become a better, higher vibe, just more passionate version of ourselves.
I love that. And I think there's such a need for what you're doing. So I can appreciate that you're doing that. You also have a YouTube channel.
Yes. Yeah, that's Shae Taylor, SHAE, and then Taylor. It's my middle name. I made it before I was married. But yeah, it basically, I started it for people looking to join the military and what it was like from kind of like a female perspective, and older. I was 25 when I joined. So it's just for people like looking for, I've implemented personal growth in there too, like how to find your purpose and just different things, that different aspects of life that I'm really trying to expand it into like more of the general public of the fitness health perspective too. So if you guys want to follow me there, that'd be awesome. Or hit me on Instagram at Mayan Fit, MAYAN Fit. And yeah, I mean, I love connecting to people, and we're all given a mission in life, and we're all given vision. And I think it's just a matter of walking it out and knowing that you are capable of achieving anything that you want to.
And I will make sure to link everything as far as the YouTube channel, the Instagram page, and any other relevant pages in the description box. Shae, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate all the value that you shared, and just sharing your story and taking the time. And you are amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.